We have a bunch of people joining by Skype, and we've had some lovely issues with the fact that I don't use a Mac, trying to get a Mac hooked up to our tech setup. But welcome to our 5th Digital Lunchtime Talk. I've got a couple of announcements I always have to make and make sure I do them. We're recording the session, and fingers crossed we'll stick it up on YouTube as a video afterwards. I haven't checked that with Jeremy, our speaker, but I will do that in a minute. We have some people from outside of Friends of the Earth here who've joined us, so thank you and welcome for coming. I think we have some people from outside of Friends of the Earth joining us on Skype as well. Can people on Skype, can you all just come off mute and say hello, please, so I know you're there?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Hello. People in the room, do you want to say hello back?
Hi. I got a Facebook thing.
Marvellous. Okay. So I've got a weird echo, so I'm going to go over this way. Okay. So this is the 5th lunchtime talk we've done. It's basically part of our digital first strand around improving digital literacy, improving the digital skills within the organisation, and essentially about how things that we can do to make life better on this planet. I'm really pleased to welcome Jeremy Waite, who's joined us from IBM today. He's going to talk a little bit more about artificial intelligence and cognitive technologies. I'm going to hand over to you. Reckon you talk for about half an hour-ish, and we'll see where we go?
We could talk for short.
Well, we'll see where we go to, but I'll hand over to Jeremy, and we'll see where we get to.
Thank you, everybody. Can I just make sure that the sound and should be okay here, actually, that the sound works fine. So we're not on. Should we not on a big screen here? No. These guys might want to see some cool stuff. So if I put sound, sorry everyone listening online, we've only just plugged in stuff. If I put sound on here so you can hear the video, but is that not going to be a huge echo with what we can hear on the screen and what I can hear through speakers here?
Should be okay. It's the fact that you've got two things picked. I think it might be okay. It's having the mic and
okay. Do you know what? This may or may not work, right? We could do this in 100 different ways. Hi, man, you're right. I'm an evangelist at IBM, which is a bit of a weird thing, right? Met Tom at a conference I do a while ago. I travel around the world talking about AI, so there's a couple of evangelists at IBM. We do some interesting stuff. So I travel around mainly from a marketing point of view, talking about what it is we do and why we do it, and the new technologies and stuff. So Tom's like, can you just come in and show us some really cool stuff that we're working on? So I've put, there's probably like 40 minutes of content of the most un-IBM content that you would normally see. So there's nothing salesy, there's nothing, just some cool stories of changes in the world, new technologies and stuff. So I thought we could either go through that. If this doesn't work at all, I'm more than happy just having no slides and having a chat. So we'll see. It may be that we struggle a lot with this. The thing is, we've got IBM's going through this massive change, right? How much do you guys know about IBM and the stuff we're doing? Have you? And forgive me, I don't mean this to be in any way sort of salesy at all. We're the 6th biggest brand in the world, and we've got this thing called Watson. Has anyone heard of Watson? Right. What do you know about Watson?
Just one at poker.
Yeah. He is our AI, yeah. That's right, and we won Jeopardy and stuff.
Do all sorts of things. Like I saw yesterday, there was a post about Watson Analytics.
Yeah.
That we could do a free trial on.
And we could look at that today if you're interested. Yeah.
Anything that intelligence can do, it can do to its current level, which is anything really.
Right. So there's various bits of IBM. We've got kind of the historical bit of IBM, which is all the hardware and stuff we've been doing for a long time. And then you've got all the new cloud stuff and SaaS, and we've got the new technologies, of which marketing is a big part of that. That's the bit that I mostly involved in. I came from Facebook. I was head of strategy at Salesforce and Adobe before then. So my job in the past has been valuing audiences. So looking at when you're trying to build up a big audience of a lot of people, whether that's around a cause or a community or whatever it is, or for whatever commercial reason, my job would be going in and trying to value what that community is actually worth, which is interesting in itself. We could just spend an hour talking about that, because when you look at business, I like to say to execs, the goal in business isn't to sell to people who need what you have. It's to work with people who believe what you believe, right? It's not just about selling people more stuff. So I often go in talking about communities, just like I did in the early days of social media. I was one of the first heads of social in Europe for Phones for You years ago. And anyway, Phones for You ended very, very badly, and I wasn't a part of that. I just must point out very quickly that was a very dark time for them. I worked with Angry Birds, as they were exploding. They were spending $500,000 a day on Facebook ads growing their community. You got $180 million a year just for Facebook ads alone. And you've got brands like Walmart that are dumping tens of millions into Facebook ads, and you've got Twitter and all the YouTube pre-roll. So I'd go in looking at the value of a fan or the value of a view and trying to figure out what that's worth. So you got 23 million fans on Angry Birds. My team would go in and justify why that community might be worth $122 million. And then all the commercial opportunities that might come off the back of that. So how do you put a value on a relationship? Do you know what I mean? And so since then, I've worked with RSPCA and Amnesty International. We're doing a lot with Red Cross and disaster response, and even things like IBM's building technology around WhatsApp at the moment, for bomb response, for where the triggers have gone off on social networks, but in private messaging apps, not in public messaging apps, so you can figure out who's safe and who's not and all that sort of stuff. So IBM's behind a lot of interesting technology as well. Now what's happened is IBM's gone through this really weird transition, as a lot of big tech companies have. They've focused more on software and services and started to invest a lot more in new technologies, of which AI and cognitive is a part of it. So in 2011, we built this thing called Watson for a bit of a laugh, which is currently the biggest commercial AI in the world. And there's a good side to that, and there's a very dark side to that. Obviously the good side is you've now got the ability to, at scale, do ridiculous things faster than ever. So this is a computer that can process 10 million records a second, pulling 2.5 billion weather data points, and can do all sorts of interesting stuff around that. But if you think about that logically, and we could get into a debate around this without any slides at all, the idea of an AI is basically a machine learning technology, right? It's a technology that's going to build itself. So if you think about that, that's a pretty scary prospect, right? The technology that builds itself, what does that mean if you play that out? Well, it's going to continue to get better, it's going to continue to get smarter, right? So if you wanted to take the very dark kind of science fiction view of where an AI like that is going to destroy the world or inspire us to destroy ourselves, something could happen when an AI thinks it's making better judgment calls than people, and it could cause famines and all sorts of extreme climate changes and stuff. So there's a lot of people. There's a really great TED talk actually by Simon Harris. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. Can we trust AI? Very provocative, worth bearing in mind when you're looking at any of these technologies. About can you trust an AI? Is it possible to trust a technology that could ultimately build itself? So in an extreme view, that's what an AI would do, right? A machine learning technology, you get high enough level of confidence, continues to build itself. What we have at IBM, we don't call it artificial intelligence, we call it augmented intelligence, because we have a slightly different view, where this is really an assistant working with teams, and it still has to be people that make these technologies work, right? So I'll show you a few clips and a few videos, and we can have a laugh and discuss it shortly. But the idea of that is that you're not kind of handing everything off to some AI or some machine learning algorithm to do everything. It's up to us to do certain creative elements, to understand what community building really means, to understand emotion and sarcasm and different types of sentiment and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, when we're being told we're having a chat, that we'd spend maybe 40 minutes just bouncing around a whole bunch of stuff that I think might be interesting, just to give you a few aspects of this world and what it looks like. Some of this will be relevant for what you guys are doing. Some of this might feel like that has nothing to do with what I'm doing, because it'll be some brand or some smart robot in a home and things. But really, I'd like you to leave this session with an idea. A, the world is probably going to change more over the next 5 years than it has over the last 15 or 20. Now, don't say that lightly. There's some pretty dramatic stuff going on that we've got to prepare for in business, but also, commercially and personally, the way we all interact with each other. But also, how do you embrace a technology like that in a way that is respectful, transparent, understands the morals and ethics behind something like that? And then how do we make sure that if there are causes we get attached to, for example, how do you regulate that stuff? I spent a lot of time with Uber, for example. There's a lot of talk around regulations of Uber. Interestingly, Uber is basically run by a political strategist now, whose job it is just to go and sue everybody. We could get into a debate around that later on. You've all seen House of Cards, right? We were joking about this before. You all House of Cards fans? You know the Kevin Spacey character, President Underwood, Frank Underwood, modelled on a guy called David Plouffe, Obama's chief of staff, got him elected in 2008 and 2012. That's the guy that runs Uber. Basically the biggest political strategist in the world. Ultimately, they don't say it, but I think that's the guy Frank Underwood was modelled on. He's the guy running Uber. Says a lot about the company, right? You've got a disruptive technology with a very, very innovative business model. The actual technology is not innovative, but the business model is very, very disruptive, very innovative. And they're going into new markets as startups to try and, disrupt everything. Their idea is that it's not a democracy. They have this quote. It's not an official quote, but they've said, this isn't where we win 51-49, this is where we win 92 and destroy the competition. So they're actively, aggressively going into every market to destroy everybody. So you have those types of disruptive technologies, and then we have ways that AIs and machine learning algorithms can figure out what could we do for, the greater good. So does that all sound okay? Does that sound mildly interesting, like the next 45? Is that okay? Listen, if you guys want to stop and not do slides, and if we start off on a conversation that you think is much more interesting, I'm more than happy showing you nothing up here. If you just want me to keep talking, as you can tell, I have no problem talking a lot. I get paid to talk for a living. Right, let me show you this 60-second video just of some of the stuff that Watson's working on, just to give you a sense of that type of stuff that we're on.
So I think you're only going to get audio up here.
Yep.
And you might need to mute your microphone once you...
Okay, well, do you want to mute that and not press play yet? Looks like we have a thing. Well, it's all cloud-based. It was essentially a series of nine refrigerators in New York, where it was originally built, and now we have the cloud-based system. Don't you just love technology? I work for the 6th biggest technology company in the world, and we can't even get a flipping PowerPoint to work.
Watson's entire record on the car.
Yeah. And you can mess with it and do anything you like with it. This would be a lot easier if I can get my buttons to work. Unless we have a... Do you have a clicker? Okay. In fact, yeah, you can be my helpful assistant. That'd be awesome. Cheers, Tom. If this is interesting, right? Because part of the job that I've got, I'm going to show you two sides to this, and we'll try and do this quite fast just to keep it interesting. I work with a lot of brands whose job it is really to tell better stories and to tell stories as fast and as compellingly as possible, right? So attention spans are super short. 2017, it's about 5 seconds, our attention spans. We'll get into that in a second. But the job really of any marketing technology and really any community, you know, whether that's a cause that we're trying to launch on Facebook or whether that's a big commercial brand trying to sell more stuff, we're trying to build emotional connections with people, right? We're trying to basically get people to fall in love with our idea or our brand. You know, the people have written great books about it. Love Marks was a brilliant book by Kevin Roberts. I'm reading this at the moment, bought this 2 days ago, Marketing. This is by the CMO of Coca-Cola, the guy that just left. Basically about how do you get people to fall in love with an idea. It's not often I read marketing books anymore and get excited because I've seen so many of them. I read 150 pages in one go. It's freaking awesome. This is about how you get people to fall in love with an idea or a brand. So I highly recommend that because it's beautiful. But in the middle of all of this, you've got this idea. Do you want to just press a bunch of buttons and just fast forward this through? Because this is some research that I did not too long ago. This is, for the last 16 years, the biggest brands in the world and how the world has moved. So if we're going to talk about where the world is going, and we're going to suggest, like I'm trying to say, the world's going to change more over the next 5 than the last 15. It's always interesting to look back about where the world's come from. So Tom's saying we want to look at disruption and exactly what disruption means. Well, I thought this would be a great way of trying to see how much the world has been disrupted. So if you think back to 97, right, Steve Jobs came back at Apple, interim CEO. Apple's 3 months away from bankruptcy. He comes back trying to grow this brand, knowing that the world is going to change a ridiculous amount. You've got the dot-com bubble, the boom and the bust in 2000. And as we start seeing, look at this, how much the world has changed, just from the sake of some of the biggest brands. Now, what Interbrand is doing, the big brand valuation agency, they basically try and value intangibles. So if you've got a community or a cause, or you've got a brand, which is essentially just what do people think in their head when they think about Coca-Cola or Samsung or Apple or something, how do you put a value on that? How do you put a value on a relationship? Back at Facebook years ago, you used to have this thing about what's the ROI of your dog, right? Or the ROI of your mum, as if to say you shouldn't put a value on this stuff. It's a relationship, man. You shouldn't go into that. Whereas you absolutely can now. You can absolutely put a cent relationship value, economic value on a relationship. This is what Interbrand is trying to do. So there's some audience metrics around engagement. A lot of it is around share price and the methodology about the economics behind these brands. You have Facebook that opened in 2004, the launch of the social web. 2008, we kind of get into Foursquare, Twitter territory. 2008, Google becomes one of the biggest brands. You start seeing that go. Just press maybe 4 more times. Right? 2 more times. Right, leave it there. So let me just spend 2 minutes showing you about some of this stuff. We could spend just a session on this, right? Because this is interesting in itself. But I'm going to try and give this context because I think we make it more relevant to you guys. Apple in 97 kind of was coming out of bankruptcy. Right? It was worth about $5 billion, but it was just about to close down. And Jobs came in. He had this 14-year plan. He was going to try and build one of the biggest, most emotional brands in the world. And he was frustrated that you've got what he thought was the most emotional brand in the world that nobody loved. And out of that came the Here's to the Crazy Ones, Think Different campaign. So I know the creative director of Apple reasonably well. They were talked about this conversation they used to have about the thing that made Apple special was that Jobs believed it existed at the intersection of humanity and technology. So basically art and science. And that perfect intersection in the middle is where, Apple's core beliefs were. I always thought that in the early days of social media, when social works really well, it's art and science, it's humanity and technology. That resonates with me a little bit. I did theology and maths and further maths at college, so I love people, love numbers. And those are usually I think, the best people to be in marketing, because you've got to have the numbers and the analytical side, but you need to understand people and how they behave. Now, what happened here, and this is when you're talking about competition, you've got Microsoft and Google that early on, they never competed with each other, ever. They didn't, did they? They had a search engine and you had an operating system. Now what happened in 2008, Google starts to come up. Google and Microsoft start battling with each other on everything, on Docs, on Office, Surface and Nexus, Chrome, Android, Windows. They start having these like-for-like competition. So they get so obsessed with competing with each other and less obsessed with building communities, which is what Apple did. They came in. So 2 years before 2008, Microsoft and Google were worth more than Apple by quite a long ways. Within 2 years, Apple is worth more than Google and Microsoft combined. Now you've got this $750 billion brand, that's doing absolutely ridiculous things. There's a whole load of other stories in here we could talk about. But really, it's just kind of one about disruption. Now, the story that I like, you can see Amazon's just coming up there into 8th in 2016. Facebook will be one of the biggest brands pretty soon. Jeff Bezos has got this idea that I'd rather stay focused on our customers while everybody else stays focused on us, whereas everyone else is looking at competitive analysis. Most of the brands that I spend time with are obsessed with competitive analysis. What's everybody else doing? How do we keep up? Instead of trying to think about how they could use technology to leapfrog everybody else. So we could get into some of that later on. But any questions on this? Is there any brands in here that you want to talk about? Hey.
Right, folks, if you've got a question, I'm going to do a roving mic job so people can hear.
Sorry, how like historically significant is that? Like, maybe there's not the data, but if you went 16 years before that, would we have seen really stable lines, and therefore what we're supposed to take from that is it's gone crazy the last 5 years, or is that just there was a period and then there was a financial crash, and so that was always going to happen?
Sorry, I don't understand. Say that again.
Like, if you had the 16 years before that, is that like, are we supposed to take from that it used to be stable, and then now it's completely thrown up in the air?
That's a really good question. I've not seen it. They only started measuring in 2000. I worked with an analyst who he claimed he actually worked in music originally, back with Factory Records and New Order and Joy Division. Their idea was that anything like this works in cycles of 18 years. So there's always going to be a level of disruption. But consistently, when you're looking at the top brands there, Coke, Microsoft, IBM, they historically were always some of the biggest brands in the world. What's happened since the web has come along in '97, then it started disrupting everything. And we used to have this saying at Facebook that social media is the one area where you don't need to outspend your competitors in order to beat them, whereas historically that was always the case. And it was always about, whoever's got the biggest budgets. It's actually come full circle now. So you do have to outspend your competitors to beat them, because social media isn't free anymore. It's pretty fucking expensive to do it properly. And it's really just an insights channel or customer service channel. But I would argue it's been massively disruptive since then, and it's only going to get faster and faster. In fact, let me give you a couple of examples why. Can we just fast forward a slide? Has anyone got a hard stop at 1 o'clock, by the way? How are we doing? What time are we on now? So at 1:30, so we've got half an hour. We're okay for 30 minutes, right? Awesome. Let me show you this video. We talk about telling stories and building emotional connections. I'm going to show you some Watson stuff in a minute. We help listen to what audiences are saying and then try and figure out what the content should be. So what should your posts be? What should your website look like? How should you change your website in real time based upon exactly what your audience is emotionally attached to right now? Forget about what's in a CRM, what says about your customers from the last days, weeks, months. What were they emotionally attached to within the last 10 minutes? What are they clicking on? What do they believe? Like, what are their emotions doing? This is basically what Watson does. The intelligence engine behind Watson understands emotions, doesn't understand just interactions. So one of the things that we can do is we can help shape content and to figure out what it is you should be doing. So if you have a campaign that's going out with certain creative, what might happen is that Watson technology behind the scenes could figure out, you think your customers and your people chasing your cause want to do this, but actually sentiment is saying something completely different. And we might be looking at sentiment analytics and tone analyzer, even tone of voice with customer service or people that phone up. And it could automatically change your website, change all your social media, change your adverts, change content that gets distributed, change some of the videos. Some of the thinking went into creating this. I thought it was fun because we were talking about water when we were on the phone, Tom. So just watch this video. It's one of the nicest ads I've seen in a little while. It's quite funny. Just press right. That's it. There was, when you remember that chart, that Interbrand chart that we looked at before, everyone used to say that Apple never did research. Remember that quote like from Steve Jobs, don't ask people what they want. We don't ask our customers what they want because they don't know what you want until we showed them. You've all heard that before. Absolutely wasn't true. Right? I don't know if you saw 5 years ago when there was all the patent infringements and there was a battle between Samsung and Apple and they requested all the... There was like 8 tons of paper on Samsung living in the Apple offices. Like Apple and Steve Jobs knew more about Samsung than Samsung did. It was absolutely ridiculous. That it's just that they didn't want to tell anyone that they had all this competitive intelligence. Now, what's happened now, when you think back to that chart, Samsung's become one of the biggest brands in the world as well. They've gone through this huge transformation of their own. One of the reasons for that is they're using AIs and they're using predictive intelligence to figure out what's their customers likely to be passionate about at this period of time in the future. So like predictive and prescriptive analytics, and they can apply that to social media or to content or TV ads or to scripts, to write stuff like this. So this is how they're now thinking about writing their content instead of the old school way, which was you had your art director, your copywriter, you had your creatives, you had your content, you went through your agencies half a dozen times and you tried to get it signed off. So slightly different way of working. We're doing some interesting stuff ourselves at IBM, so I thought I'd just show you one of the things. There's not a video on this yet. This is seamless, isn't it? right? To try and how do we cut through our message in the middle of all of that? There's one reason, just going off on a tangent, why some of these emotional components are so important to you guys as well. Before I forget, we obviously have a load of really sexy commercial things which we'd love you to buy and give us all your money. It's amazing. It's really cool. But we give away an awful lot of money. And just as I was coming over today, the team was saying, you know, well, we're doing all this interesting stuff with the Red Cross and Amnesty and all these other people. But he said, that's great. And we're doing the kind of email management for the RSPCA. They're not particularly expensive stuff. But we give away all of our consulting for free to charities. Did you know that? I had no idea. So we have something, and chase me up afterwards if you're interested. We have teams of consultants that will come in, and you've got to put a little tiny business case. It's not a lot. But essentially, you get some of the smartest analysts at IBM coming in, helping you build out your own strategy for nothing. No commercial intent whatsoever. Just, you know, giving up volunteering hours as a part of what we do. So take me up on that if you want to try and figure out what that strategy might look like. As you know, we're talking about transformation, as you're trying to keep up, and you guys are trying to do your job. But the reason this is important, think about the social web, right? The way that we used to interact, I'm sure you've all seen it. When you were attached to a cause, you used to give your time or your money, and it was either a lot of time or we'll go and do marathons and stuff. We'll go and try and raise a whole bunch of money. People don't do that anymore. So what's happened is, and certainly with a lot of the bigger charities that we're working with, we're seeing this huge drop in the commercials that they're getting in, the partnerships and the value of some of these corporate relationships, but yet their communities look like they're shooting through the roof. And what's happening is people are thinking that a like or a retweet or a little blog post is enough to attach themselves to this cause. It doesn't really have that much commercial intent, and it's not showing that much monetary value, but people believe they're now being attached to causes more than ever. But that in itself causes a problem when you guys have got to raise money to get more headcount and buy technology to do more cool stuff. So again, it's one of the reasons why I say this Watson technology is pretty useful.
Of on Skype.
Of course you can.
Anna, I was joining us on Skype, actually works from Amnesty. And she says, can I ask what you're doing with Amnesty, from someone from Amnesty? But I'm not quite sure what you can share and what you can't share, but we've got an insider asking. So
I'm not allowed to share, but if we were to say it was around disaster response and urgent action teams, that would probably mean a whole lot to it, right? Let me just show you a couple of stats, and I want to show you some case studies. We'll try and do some live stuff. I just want to show you something on the web, and I thought it'd be really interesting to feed in Friends of the Earth, their entire Twitter handle into Watson. Never done it before, but just to see if everything that Friends of the Earth has ever tweeted was put into Watson, what would Watson think of that? Bearing in mind, his job is to do personality analytics, right? We're here to try and understand the emotions. Has anyone managed social from Friends of the Earth in the room? No. Because there's interesting stuff, right? I mean, and I'll also tell you the reason why there's a good side and a dark side to this in a minute. This is just, let me just show you these two slides about speed and then we'll move on, because we could just talk all afternoon. This is fun. This is a point about speed, and it feels a bit rough coming in here and we're talking about, you know, communities and stuff, but the biggest issue that we see is that brands and communities, and certainly non-profits, NGOs, just don't operate fast enough. And they're talking about SLAs that might be in seconds or might be in minutes, but often what happens is if you're looking at the response to a request, looking at, you know, someone giving an info pack, whether it's fundraising, if you're looking at a response to an issue that's gone wrong, you've got days and weeks often before you get back to people. What this is a picture of the trading floor at UBS. Now we do a huge amount with banks, financial services at IBM. It's about 90% of the world's banks use our technology. This is 3,000 workstations. So we're talking about speed, right? Think back to what we were saying before, 97. In 1997, the average amount of time that people held shares in a company was 4 years. The average amount of time you held a share. Do you know what it is today? 22 seconds. Yeah, just press click next. So if you think that a share is an interest in a company, you could quite easily argue that people aren't interested in companies very much. You could also look at this transactional view people have got to fundraising because they're just putting a like or the retweet on it as well. So one of the reasons for that, and this is a visualization of high frequency trading, which is essentially a machine learning algorithm, not unlike Watson, but in order to try and buy stuff and sell stuff as quickly as possible. So this is 1 second of trades slowed down into a 5-minute video. 10,000 trades a second. So what you're actually seeing is a trader that might bid on a whole load of stuff on the stock exchange, and then what you might see is that that price fluctuation moves by a tiny, tiny, tiny bit in two commodities, maybe Chicago and New York. And it could be down to something as stupid as the fiber line just isn't fast enough. So at one point, there's a price discrepancy between the two markets. So what will happen, because by law you've got to bid on everything, they'll see a price discrepancy, and then all of a sudden the machine learning algorithm will bid on that one stock up to 10,000 times a second. Buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. 10,000 times a second. What do you think that's worth for UBS? $20 billion a year, just by being 3,000th of a second faster than their competitors. That's where Michael Lewis' book Flash Boys came out of all of that. $20 billion a year from being 3,000th of a second. So it sounds very commercial, and I feel a bit dirty in talking about this with you guys, right? But the point is this, it's all about speed. It's not survival of the fittest anymore, right? Survival of the fastest. And the brands that we go in to speak to is how do we put technology in place that isn't expensive, and that it's more of an organizational IT issue than anything else, but in order to you to operate at that speed, when you've got to manage millions and millions of people within your communities, that's ultimately what these technologies, the AIs, and certainly what Watson's trying to do. You have a question?
Question about digitalization. How do you know when to stop? Because if you think about the crash X number of years ago, it was because it was a continuation of machines talking to machines without the human person coming in.
Yeah. That's a conversation I don't want to get into, knowing that this is going to end up on YouTube. But it raises a really interesting point, right? Because you've got machines talking to each other. When we mentioned that stat before, of by 2020 there's going to be 1 million devices added to the internet every single hour, in a roundabout way of answering your question, what that's going to mean is marketing teams, or whether it's a fundraising, brand, PR team that wants to go out and get your share of voice, share of conversation, you're going to be marketing to machines by 2020 as much as you're going to be marketing to people. Now, the danger becomes in when you take people out of that equation, because as we've seen in 2008, for example, bad things happened. I owned a couple of agencies and I went bankrupt in the middle of all of that, and Lehman closed down, so I was very personally attached to that whole thing. And the darkest side, what they claim is actually high frequency trading is a very small percentage of the market, but it speaks to a much bigger issue about what happens when you put computers in charge of building stuff and you just let them go off and do their own thing. Flash Boys is actually a great book if you're interested in looking at the ethics and morals of that afterwards. But you're right, it takes you down a pretty dark place quite quick. Yeah.
Where's the button?
There's,
Literally, the red
so
one. In case of emergency.
Our issue is about regulation. This is a whole separate discussion that we need to have in the pub. Kind of where you stop. There's a guy, really beautiful guy called Wadi Kamfar from Al Jazeera News Network. I was talking to him a while ago, Director General of Al Jazeera. So as you can understand, he's got his fair share of issues when he was in charge. And he had this really beautiful quote. He was actually talking about the interbrand charts that were scooting up all over the place and disruption. And he said, in the past, CEOs used to be judged by how well they acted in a crisis, and today they're judged by how well they anticipate. It's a beautiful quote. So really, all of this technology that we're looking at is how do we anticipate crises? And the fact that if you've got enough information being fed into a system and that data is accurate, you've got a high enough degree of confidence. This is, ultimately what Watson's able to do, processing 10 million records a second, like the high frequency trading, 10,000 tweets a second, whatever it is. You've got enough of a data set being fed into it, you can start to predict when those crises are likely to happen. So, of course, you can look at the crisis like this. We could look at Trump, we could look at Brexit, we could look at a whole host of things that we didn't see coming. VW, there's no reason that the management team at VW should have had the crisis that they did with their brand. They should have seen all of that coming because they were feeding all the same information into one place. Most companies, they reckon about 88% of enterprise companies don't even share their own customer data between their own sales and marketing teams. So what happens is, because all of your data lives in separate places and it's unstructured and it's all hashtagged and you can't understand it properly, crises happen and then nobody could see them coming. So the ultimate objective, if you're in retail, would be single view of a customer or single view of a, whatever that is. Anyway, brilliant question, but we need to continue that over some wine. Anything else? I want to show you some other stuff. But are we okay? Has anyone got a question? All right. Let's see how we're doing. Can we press the next? Let's see what we're going to talk about next. We can fast forward through that. If you're interested in marketing, I did some research in December. I went to 1,200 senior marketers in Europe, asked them what the biggest challenges were, put it into a report, 70 pages long. We'll send it out to you guys for free if you're interested in where the world of marketing is likely to go and why. there's basically two things that came out of the report you might be interested in. One of them, I don't think you guys are guilty of, focusing more on acquisition and retention. It's 7 times cheaper to keep a customer than get a new one, but yet we're still spending much more of our money to acquire new people, which is a problem in itself. But the bigger issue is this one at the bottom. We won't dwell on it now, but this is one of the biggest issues I think you guys will have in the future. And I suspect that most of you don't even realize it's a problem yet. Has anyone heard of dark social? Okay, so dark data is this buzzword around all this unstructured data we can't make sense of. I think years ago we had command centers. In fact, let me click to Firefox and try and show you something here. Your office is crying out for a really badass command center that shows everything that's happening in the company. If you would like me to set one up for you, I would be more than happy to. Just have a big screen out there, shows everything that's going on, everything that people are saying in real time. We can set that up. We could probably do that for you as part of one of those voluntary things. Don't hold me to it, but how cool would that be, right? If you got a full command center. So what I'm going at, I'll tell you what this is in a second. The way that you had command centers is you were measuring everything that's happening on social media. This is the way marketing and brand storytelling and analytics insights around customers used to work. You measure everything that's going on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You try and pull in all your data, your purchase data, for example, but ultimately you're looking at blogs and forums and communities, right? It's about 500 million different blogs, forums, and communities. You put all of the public comments, you take all your comments off YouTube, everything from your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you put it in one place, you visualize it on a board like that. That's what command centers used to do. That was easy when everything was public, because everyone was tweeting and Facebooking and posting everything publicly. It doesn't happen like that anymore. This is one of the reasons why the world is changing so fast and a lot of brands can't keep up. It's also why brands are advertising in the way that they are, because they've been so disrupted and their engagement's dropping through the floor, and why social media is nothing like it used to be and TV is still the biggest channel. In fact, if you measure the biggest engagement-wise, actually attention-wise, if you measure the biggest social networks in the world and you compare them just to TV shows in terms of attention, at the moment I speak to CDOs and CIOs and heads of disruption innovation, and they're putting everything on Facebook. They've got Snapchat strategies, right? 750,000 a day to advertise on Snapchat at the moment. You've got your Periscope or your Facebook Live strategies, all these new innovative technologies coming through. If you were to measure them with where people actually spend their time, channels-wise, based upon TV shows, Facebook's 146th. It's not even in the top 100. I think Instagram's 400. I think YouTube is around about 1,000. Twitter's 2,902 in terms of the most successful media channel. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yet the hysteria is we do everything on Twitter. But yet, in terms of engagement, it's still TV, radio, billboard, press, direct mail. Still the old way of doing it to get the most attention. So what's happening is, in 2017, this is the one number you want to write down if you want to remember one number. 88% of consumer conversations take place in messaging apps. 88% take place in messaging apps. Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Line, WeChat, whatever that private network is, even copy and pasting a URL into an email and sending it to somebody. All private. We can't see that because we're not GCHQ or the NSA or 8200. So we can't go and hack some of that stuff, so it's all private. Now, what used to happen is you used to put all that information on a social network, whereas now, when you feed stuff through to a command center, powered by those social networks, you're only looking, Twitter's only 8% of the conversation, it's tiny. Facebook's 15% of the overall conversation, and most of that's private. So you can't actually see that much of what people are saying anymore, because it all happens within a private messaging app. So that term is dark social. Now, I surveyed all the people across Europe, some of the VPs and CMOs, directors of marketing, to say, A, have you heard of the term? B, do you think it's a problem? And the feedback on that other piece of research that we just saw that I'll share with you, 94% of the industry doesn't think it's a problem. And yet all your customers are going somewhere else and you can't see them. So actually, and often it's the NGOs and some of the charities that we're working with that are the most responsive, because we're looking at WhatsApp strategies, or you're looking at Facebook Messenger for brands. Because if you engage with someone in Facebook Messenger, you've got a perfect view of a customer. Because everything, just like a text message, lives in one place. And you can track it and you can understand where they've gone and what they've done and what they've said. But obviously, you've got to be respectful in order to allow someone to have access with you. Because people don't want to give access to public data anymore. I'll show you why in just a sec. What this is a cognitive command center powered by Watson. So not only is it going to show Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff, but you'll have Watson, one of the charts might flip in a second. Watson will apply personality insights to the audience. So we're looking at the audience, not just what they've said, the words, and any analytics program can do that. That's easy. We can look at words. If we're a bit smarter, we'll look at hashtags. If we're really smart, we'll look at emojis and emoticons and stickers and start measuring some of that as well. But what nobody else does, and this is one of the technologies that IBM has got, we start looking at emotions. So what do people mean and what do they feel when they're using this type of language? And this is the type of stuff that we're putting in command centers now. So what should happen, for example, is that you can see those emotions and that would trigger an email, or it would trigger a different creative on a website, or it would trigger a different interaction on social media. Because we all make decisions with our hearts and justify them with our heads. So we've got to speak to people emotionally as opposed to the way that marketers usually do, which is on transactions and clicks. And you went on this website and clicked this, therefore I'll give you that. People don't act like that, especially not when you're trying to attract them to a cause or a community, which is essentially a group of like-minded people, common set of values and beliefs, and make emotional decisions. This is why some of this technology is so important, because it's measuring the emotions. Let me show you what this looks like in real terms, and there's a good side and there's a scary side. Everybody is not supposed to do it, but if you was to keep it under your hat, you could go on and play. We have something, the official answer is, I'll show you them in a second. It's obvious we're not going to get to the end of the presentation, we'll bounce around a little bit. There's 50 APIs that do a lot of interesting things. Tone analyzer, understanding the tone in somebody's voice, which either drives customer service, it's a technology we put in driverless cars. Not just to understand what people are saying, but what mood they're in the car. So if someone's terrified or calm, or if they're excited or nervous, you can understand their tone, and automatically the driving style of the autonomous vehicle changes based upon the mood that you're in. In marketing, that could mean what's customer journey. Somebody wants to find information about this new cause. They want to save bees, or they want to, water, climate change, whatever. You want to try and understand how much information do I give you to get you to convert, to give you everything that you need. So you might look at tone. You might look at the words that they're using. You might understand quite quickly based upon the behavior, because you can also see 10 million people have gone through roughly the same journey. You could start to predict when someone lands on your site and asks you a question, how long are you likely to have them for? Is this person going to leave the site in 75 seconds without doing anything? Or are they likely to stay 3 minutes? And those type of interactions might dictate the type of messages that you have. It might also mean that the second someone lands on your site, you can start predicting the potential lifetime value of that person, of how much they might raise based upon some interactions. And I'll show you how to do that in a sec. But these APIs you've got access to play. They're all completely open. It's one of the other things about IBM. Any developer can mess with it. Tone analyzer, natural language processing, sentiment analytics, face recognition.
This analysis, we do it with any other vehicle.
You can. I'm going to show you the dark side of what happened to this in a minute, which you might find quite amusing. So analysing all your tweets, he's taking a sample of 200. Then what Watson is going to do, if we can see this, let's blow this up. So this is Watson trying to understand what he thinks is your tone of voice based upon the communications that you're giving out. Now this isn't going to be representative of who you are, but this is what Watson thinks based upon the comms that you send out. It may be that it's all broadcast. It may be that there's not much levels of engagement. You can get into that. But you are particular and excitable, adventurous, eager to experience new things, empathetic. You feel what others feel and are compassionate towards them. That's pretty good, right? Not bad at all. You're confident. You're hard to embarrass and self-confident most of the time. You're unconcerned with achieving success and taking pleasure in life. Awesome. And you make decisions with little regard for how they show off your talents. You prefer activities with a purpose greater than just personal enjoyment. That's pretty cool, right? That's pretty badass. I don't think that's a million miles off. Now what will happen is the Personality Insights API We'll also create starburst graphics, just if any of you ever done personality testing. You want to understand what are the emotional drivers behind how we engage with each other. And you start looking at the big five, and you start looking at levels of adventurousness, hedonism, emotional range. You know, some people have very, very narrow emotional ranges. They're super happy or incredibly pissed off all the time. And you start then figuring out, how do I trigger the way that I interact with this person based upon the emotions that they're going to exhibit? So what Watson would be able to do, for example, is take the emotions of every single person, one at a time, and send out a completely unique message to every single person based upon their emotions. And it's using this kind of thing here. So what you would be doing is you're looking for the extremes. So we're looking for anything that's the 90s or above, or single figures and below. So you're 99% adventurous, right? We are 3% prone to worry, etc., etc., right? You get the idea. Right, now let me show you where this starts to go wrong. I'm in a lot of trouble at the moment, because when the inauguration speech happened, I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we fed Trump's speech in real time into Watson, just to see what Watson really thought? So in the morning, I drew this little picture just for a bit of a laugh, and I thought we'll compare Trump's speech to Obama's. Anyway, I won't dig into the whole post because it was really just me live blogging. It wasn't actually meant to be read by a bunch of people. But it's a big post. There's a whole load of interesting stuff in it. Let me see. I'll just pull up one of the graphics, and it's almost irrelevant what's on the post because I'll tell you the outcome. This post had 1.2 million views, which never happens on LinkedIn ever. You normally get like tens of thousands if you're an evangelist and you get a community and stuff. This was, I put the post out about 45 minutes after the end of the speech, which was faster than the Washington Post got up the transcripts and stuff and all the emotional insights. Now what happened was, I thought Watson could have a look, and being as smart as he is, understand all of this stuff. So we had all the graphics laid up, set them all up in PowerPoint. Already had Obama's research done because that was quite easy, and then started comparing side by side the emotions. What do you find most striking about that? Exactly the flipping same. How is that possible? You've got two of the most dramatic inaugurations of all time, and yet the biggest AI in the world couldn't understand the difference between the two. Even though one was all about American carnage and fear, and it was actually quite a polished speech compared to his campaign speeches, but you know, the emotions and the keywords that he used were very carefully placed, versus Obama's, which is all about hope, this very optimistic view of the world going forward. The reason was simple. Trump's speech was only 1,116 words, and Obama's speech was 2,420 words, and it's not a big enough sample set for it to make a smart decision on. So what I did, I thought, right then, let's put every single tweet he's ever sent and every single campaign speech he's ever made into Watson. And as you can imagine, and I won't say because we're going to live stream this and maybe put it on YouTube, but the results were very, very different. Needless to say, I will not be publishing them. But you talk about the accuracy of an AI and understanding people. It's all about how much data gets put into it in order to understand. So this is where you need people to try and make sense of it, because any human listening to those speeches knew straight away they were totally different. I got a request last night from a very big newspaper saying that some of his speeches have been compared to Hitler's. So do you mind if we have Hitler's compared to Trump's speeches and you can publish them into Watson? Do you know what I mean? Anyway, what could possibly go wrong? But yeah, and I spoke to the analysts as well. I spoke to a lot of analysts at Watson looking at some of this stuff. Where are we going to go? I'll show you this. How do I get rid of this? I just want to press play on that slide. Yeah, so I spoke to a bunch of analysts about it, and really it kind of speaks to this bigger issue about is man and machine, right? Not kind of man versus machine. This conversation about AI and where it's going to go. So let me show you a video. We might end with this and then just have a bit of a chat. Has anyone seen Jibo before? No. So this is real. So I know we've bounced around a lot, and we can stay and have a cup of tea if you want to have a chat. I wanted to show you the North Face website, which is a website we've just built, which is driven by AI. Happy to show you that because you guys could embed that technology in any of your sites super easy. Could do a live demo of that if you want to see it. But this paints a picture of where the world is going, which is what our little session today is supposed to be about. Jibo is the world's first social robot, and it's out. So the video I'm about to show you is real. There's no smoke and mirrors, and there's nothing that was created just out of fun to try and do some science fiction type thing. It's created by the professor of social robotics at MIT, and it's professed by the VP of engineering at Netflix. So the guy that originally built the algorithm on Netflix, that recommends the engine for you watch this movie, this is the next one you're going to see. So they built this, and they put him together, and it's just 3-axis motor system, similar to BB-8, right, in Star Wars. It's going to be $499 when it comes out in the UK in a couple of months. It's $599 with an SDK kit, which essentially means you can build APIs into it and have it doing anything. So got IBM developers trying to figure out what to plug into it. This is the future of a connected home. So there's a couple of things to bear in mind about this that are huge shifts in where the world's going to go between now and 2020. 3 things. By the end of 2019, 30% of all browsing behavior is going to happen without a screen. Think about that. 30% is going to involve no screen. We're going to be talking to stuff. 1 in 5 brands are going to abandon their apps altogether. So app strategies are going to get taken away. This is the stuff that we're already seeing with some of the biggest brands now, people like North Face. A couple of reasons for that. When you look at the stats, everyone gets excited about apps because we should have an app. And it's, this is what people download and they keep up to date with stuff. 87.5% of engagement is in apps. Brilliant. Look at where that engagement is. 80% of it is in within 5 apps. 85% of all the apps in the App Store don't even live in a list, so they're impossible to find. Call them zombies. And 60% of all apps in the App Store have never been downloaded, not even once. And yet they cost a fortune to build, super expensive to maintain, much easier to do a mobile responsive website, especially when you put an AI behind it that can do all the automated stuff, which I could show you with North Face. So really what's happening is you've got these huge shifts. We're going to be talking to stuff. And also brands, they reckon 30% of retail behavior is going to happen via AR or VR, 20 as well, some type of immersive experience. So as you're watching this video, it's about 3.5 minutes long, and we'll finish then and do a Q&A. And I'll get back to work. Think about what this might mean for anyone requesting information, or for anyone with customer service issues, or complicated legal issues, or medical and healthcare issues. You can feed any amount of data into this, and using Watson it would process up to 10 million records a second and instantly give you the response. We're already talking to agencies about this. You could go and sit down with your agency and say, show me every single fundraiser that we had in 2016. Shows you straight away, right? Show me every one of those that was 45 to 55. In a second, it shows you those. Show me every one of those that watches TV and browses on the internet on a tablet whilst doing their email. Shows you every one of those in a second. Right now, show me how to target every single one of those on Facebook. What will it cost to target them with AdWords? What might it cost if we did a TV campaign? And in seconds, it gives you the answer. Now, think about that the way we used to work. That's like a couple of months of strategy planning, agency fees, backwards and forwards, running the reports and the dashboards. Something like this is going to be able to do it in seconds. Anyway, this is what's going to happen when it's just as a proof of concept of what's going to happen when it's, for example, live in your house. It is. So here's the thing. Let me wrap this up in 3 minutes, and you guys can go and I'll stay. It's always on. So the issue with anything like this is that it's a value exchange, right? So what happens is brands usually go wrong because they try and capture your information first, as opposed to creating value first. This is a way that marketing's gone wrong, because it's like, I need to get your data, get your newsletter sign up, get the click, get the thing. There's arguably, now we don't know if it's true for the purposes of YouTube and everything else, but it's widely believed, shall we say, that Facebook could turn on the microphone on your phone at any time that they wanted, listen to what's going on, and then serve you content based upon the ambient surrounding, and recommend a Spotify playlist or whatever. Amazon could turn on the webcam and do instant retina scanning to figure out age, sex, location, what you've done, and understand what you're looking at, and then serve you a piece of content. There is an app I have on my phone that is not an IBM app. It's based on Layer, which you may have seen for a while. It's been out a long time. Augmented reality app. I could point my phone at someone, it tells me who they are. And if they've last tweeted and its GPS on their phone is connected, it'll show me the last thing they tweeted or Instagrammed. If I clicked on that and went through to Instagram, a tiny piece of software, which is also free, will tell me age, sex, location, religion, show me their job title, their salary to within $10,000, where they shop, who you're influenced by, where you eat, magazines, TV shows, etc., etc. 400 data points based upon just pointing my phone at you. So there's two sides to this. Issue, first of all this technology is available. We've got to be respectful in how we use it. We've got a massive responsibility, right, to what we do with this technology. The issue with something like this, for example, is when does it become valuable that you allow it to have access to everything? So let me just give you an example just to close. And I'll tell you why this picture's on the screen. I was sat with the Jibo team. We were late for a meeting. We had Jibo running. Completely lost track of time, as we have done today, because we're talking about cool stuff, right? And it's really exciting. Totally forgot, and the meeting ran over. Jibo said, "Hello, Jeremy." This is exactly true. I'm not making this up. "Yes, Jibo. You're going to be late for your next meeting if you go the way that you would normally go." Now, bearing in mind, I've given him access to everything, to my calendar, to my text messages, to my emails, to my Google Maps, my Google account, the whole thing, to my Uber. Can see my location, can tell where I am, can understand the journeys that I might have gone on. You're going to be late for your next meeting. But if I call you an Uber right now, it's going to arrive in 6 minutes, you're going to be 4 minutes early, it's going to cost you £12. That's not all. We own the Weather Channel, right? IBM owns the Weather Channel, which drives a lot of the intelligence in what we do around advertising and comms and stuff. It's also raining right now, and I know you just bought new shoes. I kid you not. Which I actually did. They weren't these ones, but I really like Jeffrey West's. So Jibo said all of this. Do you want me to call an Uber? Yes, Jibo. So by voice, I've done nothing, and all of a sudden I'm arriving at a meeting early. It's only costing me $12. I'm not getting wet, and it was a completely separate experience, £12. It was a totally separate thing. Now, if that is a big enough value exchange, and I'm not hiding anything, I might have no problem in giving Jibo access to my data. The bigger issue obviously becomes around privacy and what might happen with potential hacks and all the future of it. That's why the Sam Harris TED Talk is good, just to try and have that personal perspective about what you think and believe about it. What I think is going to happen is that people are just going to use it for specific tasks to start with. So bringing this back down to something realistic, what might be happening is that you'd be talking to it about running an email campaign, or you'd actually be typing in your email campaign into the tool, or like North Face are doing. As soon as somebody lands on the site, they don't ask for their data. They have no idea who a customer is, but they just ask them a couple of questions. What do you want? And behind the scenes, Watson understands what you're typing in and changes the website based upon what you've just asked it to do. So that's available now. If you want to stay, I can show you. That's a super practical application. It could drive a different type of social media. It could drive a different type of email interaction. So it's going to change the way that we interact, whether we like it or not. The challenge is, what do we do with this technology? So what's on the screen, I'll try and not break up about this. This is my little girls. So I did turn the job down at IBM a few times. I worked for a great company before. I didn't have any plans on leaving. I was talking about the AIs, and I'm trying to get my own head around what's going on with the future of AI and the power of AI and what you do to put it into place. And also looking at the transition that IBM's going on and stuff. So my two little girls, Petra and Matilda, were both given 0% chance of survival. This is a perfectly true story. Last year, my wife at 20 weeks had surgery. It's like one of the first times it's ever happened, new procedure. They went in, sorry if this is a bit gross, cut the placenta in half because neither of them were going to survive. 0% chance for small twin, 40% for big twin. So chances are they're both not going to make it, right? But we've got to make sure that when one doesn't make it, the other one is not forced to give birth super premature, then we've got brain damage and a whole load of other stuff. Anyway, we have the surgery, everything seems to go on. They still seem okay, and the blood flow to the brain and the heart and umbilical cord and bowels and stuff, all the fluids, everything seems okay. This is Matilda when she's in hospital a few days after she's born. Then she has to have heart surgery. You're not going to make heart surgery. Break my heart. There's a million data sets coming off of her. So I'm trying to detach myself emotionally from what's going on, bearing in mind I'm thinking about getting this job at IBM, right? Where's all the data going? Is it going into a cloud? Are you going to do something with it? So it kind of sucks that you told me that they were both going to die and they're both still alive, and it looks like they might even be okay. So how do you make sure that the predictions for the next person? Long story short, I won't give the full version because I'll probably cry. They described what is essentially marketing technology that we've been discussing today, and about how all of this data at the moment doesn't go anywhere, but they said we're working on a project with IBM. So I broke down, obviously. And they said, well, in order to try and predict within a 24-hour window what's likely to happen so that we can save the lives of little kids in intensive care. And they described to me exactly how I described customer journeys in the PlayStation network of trying to do predictive intelligence for a customer journey. It's just predictive intelligence for healthcare. And it was insane. So I accepted the job straight away. I'm like, I don't care what happens. I've got to work for a company that's doing that. So on the one hand, we've got the stuff we're doing around climate change that we discussed. We've got the stuff that we're doing to try and figure out how to save kids in NICU. It's widely believed Watson's going to find the first cure for Alzheimer's, Crohn's, and Parkinson's disease. But this same technology can be applied into marketing and fundraising. But our responsibility is what we do with it, right? So the quote that I'd like to leave you with is really this idea that whilst all of this stuff is freaking awesome, technology is nothing, right? Technology is nothing. What's important is that we have faith in people, that they're good and they're smart, and if we give them the right tools, hopefully we're going to do something wonderful with them. Amen? Thanks, everyone. Sorry for bouncing around so much in the tech issues and stuff, but hopefully there was some interesting stuff in there.
Thank you,
Anyone that's got questions or wants to chat?
Well, I've got Sean. I've been keeping on hold for about 20 minutes at a question, so I think we could bring him in. I'm conscious we're way over time. People want to stay. Jeremy's happy to stay around and have a chat. If you need to head off, that's fine. Sean, if you want to fire away with the question, we'll kick off with you, and we'll just do it ad hoc and see where we get to.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Jeremy. It's really interesting talk, and I'm a big fan of data-driven approaches to sort of decision-making support, and so I'm really excited by some of the potential of AI.
On Skype, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Wonderful. Sorry, I was waxing lyrical and you can't hear me. I was basically saying we've run over time by quite a lot, but I'm conscious that I've been keeping Sean on hold for about 20 minutes and he had a question, so I'm going to bring him in a second. Jeremy's happy to hang around for a little bit and take questions. I'll come to you guys on Skype first because obviously you're not in the room. So I'll go with Sean first. If you have a question on Skype, then just type your name in. I'll come back to you. We'll try and keep this maybe 10-15 minutes. We'll see where we get to. Fire away, Sean.
How about now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay.
I'm going to bring you a mic, Andrew, one second. And I'll figure out Sean later.
This is just going into the broadcast. We're not supposed to hear it, right?
You're not supposed to hear it.
No. So that was amazing. Definitely going to take you up on that consultancy thing that you referred to. That's really cool. My question's more about like the future of the tech. And from how I see it, one of the ways to potentially mitigate the dangers of AI becoming this super intelligent overlord is to make us more intelligent. And at the moment it is. We've all got our AIs to a degree. And so the one question is, what is IBM's idea? I know like you open source everything, and that's obviously in line with this question, but what is the idea about ensuring the democratization of AI, that it's available to everyone, just like it is now, just as it continues to grow, and does that make sense? Okay, and then just to follow on to that, like the Jibo, for me, that kind of thing is increasing the interface between human and machine, and that's kind of, I think, where it's heading, and the ultimate place that's going to go is like the complete integration, the mind cloud integration, which I know like there are people working on, and Elon Musk is supposedly going to announce some brain lattice.
So the technology already, and I've seen it, can't say where, but I've seen the technology that already exists in a contact lens to do that.
Yeah.
So you could live stream or photograph in the way that you would have done originally on the old Google Glass,
yeah.
And that fell over for 1,000 different reasons. But the technology exists already to be able to do that in a contact lens. The main issue is how you power the battery life behind it, which is they're trying to use the saline in your eye and stuff to try and power it. But so this is all going to happen anyway, right?
Sure, yeah, it's inevitably going to happen.
Right.
My question is more IBM's stance in it. Like, are you looking at the full integration of human and machine? Is that something that you're looking at? Or?
Do you know, I really hate to do this. Let me give you two answers. If you want to chat in the pub, we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
It would be inappropriate for me to answer that with an IBM point of view, because I'm not Ginny, which is, I know it's horrible, and like size in the room and stuff. I would point you towards, for the most articulate answer that I've ever heard on that, Ginny did a panel at Davos, the World Economic Forum, 2 weeks ago, when she was asked exactly that question. And she also got into this really interesting debate around, is it going to destroy people's jobs? And her response was, well, if it's man and machine, and Watson is basically an assistant to help you out and make you more intelligent and faster, then it's not going to destroy any jobs. Now, if you look at that in the wider context, or if you look at it from a marketing point of view, it's believed that anything that takes less than 10 seconds to do could be automated super quick. Then if you look back to 1908, right, when automation happened in factory lines, for example, with Henry Ford, and the Model T started rolling out, and that disrupted everyone's jobs, and the whole faster horses thing. They said the same thing again, it's going to destroy everyone's jobs. Now, it didn't. What happened is it got everybody to have different jobs, and everybody's job evolves. Like both of my sisters are head teachers. They're constantly telling me for the lower end primary school kids that they've got 50% of the jobs that they're going to have when they grow up haven't even been invented yet. So the danger is there's these cycles that you go through of, is it going to take people's jobs away? Ultimately, probably yes. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, because what it would mean is that you're going to go through certain stages mentally of preparing for what my next job is going to be, but ultimately we're going to find ourselves in a place where we've got more time and we're more creative. We could create better content, love customers better, build better campaigns, etc., etc. And we're not doing all the automated stuff that we're used to. If you watch Ginny's answer for the view about democratization at Davos, World Economic Forum, just search Ginny Rometty, our CEO. I mean, I couldn't put it into words anywhere near as well as she could anyway. But I would also point you towards a book, which is superb. I mean, any of you have read a book I read a book a week. I do a lot of reading. This is probably the best book that I read last year. It's called The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly. So he's the founder of Wired magazine. He's their senior chief maverick. And The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly is talking about the 12 technological forces that are going to shape the future. It's basically 12 chapters. One of them's on cognitive, which isn't exactly answering your question. It's flipping brilliant. It's really, really good. And it goes into the mindset of people who may or may not lose their jobs and the positive view that would happen as that plays out. And it's to what you were saying before around the cycles of what's that going to look like in 18 years and then 18 years after that.
Cool. Thanks.
I have a question I haven't properly formulated in my head, but as I don't have half an hour to do that, so I'm going to try and ask it anyway. And it's to do with data points, I suppose, in terms of where they come from. And I don't. Is there a danger that because in terms of getting all of the data for all of these things, we're only actually taking it from quite a small proportion of the world in number, if we think of it in numbers terms, because the huge numbers of the world don't have access to the technology yet. They're different stages of development. That we end up formulating answers
that are actually incorrect. As you can see,
who's going to win an election, or are we going to leave Europe?
Exactly. Well, to a degree, but I mean on bigger issues, say even with medicine, etc. Because the pool of people who have access to the technology, and even on Facebook, I know you can say now that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to roll Facebook out through India, and you can say that that's a response to this, but I hope you can understand what I mean by this question. I feel like if I had 30 minutes longer, I could probably articulate it much better. But.
I mean, so you've got global issues and local issues, right? I'll give you an example, and this, I don't even know if this is a relevant answer or comment, but it's all about the amount of data that you've got access to. So you mentioned medicine, which is, I love the NHS, as you've seen with all the stuff back there. There was an instance with Watson where there was this kid suffering from what was a very unusual disease, and the doctors were all stood around trying to diagnose what's going on. Very limited data set, but just as any doctor, it's based upon their education and the knowledge base that they've got. But 6 of the smartest people in the room trying to figure out what's wrong with this kid. No one's got an idea. The diagnostics, as well as the diagnoses and then the history of this kid, was put into Watson. And it could analyze all of those records in real time. And what Watson can also do is about 40,000 new medical journals every day are fed into Watson to analyze. So you've got Watson is knowing everything that's ever been written and done about this particular combination of events of where this kid is right now. And what happened was Watson was able to pinpoint that there was a potential disease that this kid had, not just that nobody else had thought of in the room, but that only one of those doctors had ever even heard of. Now, what we're seeing at the moment, you're talking about levels of confidence. The way that an AI might work in healthcare, for example, just as relevant in marketing, but same type of thing. It would be in order to affirm, are we doing the right thing? So what you wouldn't want to do is just give an AI access to everything and it makes the decision and it gives the medicine and does the whole thing and it's all fully automated. But what it might do is say, here's the 10 things that are most likely to be wrong with this person, and the doctors are saying it's going to be one of the top 3. In fact, and they're usually right, 70-80% of the time, it's usually one of the top 2 or 3. But in certain cases, something is going to exist from 3 through to 10 that no one else has heard of before, that Watson was able to surface every single time. So you've got the smartest assistant in the world with you all the time. Now, whether you're a consultant, whether you're a radiographer, whether you work in oncology, whether you're a marketer, a media planner, it doesn't matter. If you've got that level of intelligence and access to it within seconds, that's going to change everything about the way that you do your job. Now, the more data you get, the smarter that's going to be. So if you look at, say, genome sequencing, for example, the data set's incredibly small. But you can only go based upon what it is. So a good example of that, and this speaks to one of the biggest trends, I'll try and say this in 2 minutes. You've got 2 big shifts in the world, bringing it back to marketing and the real world example. Everything used to be based around personalization, which was getting as much data as you can to do the next best action. Doesn't matter what that is. Whatever your job is, you've got to figure out the next thing to do. The more data, the more accurate that personalization recommendation is going to be. That was great when everyone gave us access to their data. In 2017, it's widely believed that 55% of Western Europe population and the US no longer want to give any data to marketers or brands ever. 55%, that is a lot of people, right? 55% no longer want to give any personal data ever. So that means that personalization is in trouble because you don't get access to it, just like dark social changes the way that social media works. But what that means, it introduces a new thing, which is called personification. So if that's not a term you've heard of, it's worth Googling and having a look at. What personification is how do I still give the right message to the right person at the right time when I don't have your information? I don't know your email, your mobile, your date of birth. I don't have any personal identifiers around who you are. Because if I just know a handful of things about you, but I also know enough of an audience of a big enough sample size, with a pretty high degree of confidence, I can figure out exactly what you're likely to do next. A great example would be take an Apple Mac out of the box. You don't log into anything. You fire it up for the first time and do one search on Google, they know 57 things about you. It's really easy to start personalizing things very quickly, even when they don't know who you are. So this shift in the future about getting more and more data is going to be around personification, just knowing a few things about a lot of people, whereas the way we used to work was just knowing a lot of things about a few people. Does that make sense? So the more data you feed in, the better. But for you guys, whatever APIs, this is why Watson's great, you've just got a platform, you plug anything you want into that. Weather channel data, every customer conversation you've ever had, every commercial transaction, every fundraiser you've ever dealt with, every piece of PR, all your analytics to the history of whenever your website launched. You feed everything into that system, it's going to start making some pretty smart decisions.
I've finally got a question from Sean in Deepest Dark Wales. So I'm going to take this as the last question and we'll wrap up because we're way over time. He's written an essay, so bear with me. He's got a preface to his question, which is that, say thank you for a fascinating talk, so I'd echo him on that. He's a big fan of data-driven approaches to decision support, and he's very excited by the potential of AI. He agrees it's transformative, but AI is transformative by making sophisticated real-time response viable. But he wanted to pick you up on the predictive potential of AI and ask if you're familiar with Nassim Nicholas Taleb's concept of anti-fragility, which is based on the claim that some of the most significant events are intrinsically unknowable, let alone predictable, and that instead of deceiving ourselves with the conventional response to crises, that if only we had more information we could avoid them, we should actually be focusing on positioning ourselves to benefit from uncertainty, and AI may have a role to play in that, but it can't overcome the need for those kinds of strategies. So finally a question, is there a philosophical limit to the power of AI?
Absolutely no limit whatsoever, in my opinion, and it is going to get smarter, you know. It's going to be about those levels of confidence. I mean, it's believed that once you get above 80%, you can kind of let it run and it's going to learn itself. The first part of that is fascinating because I wrote a blog post about this yesterday. If you want to have a look, if you're interested or bored, jeremy.live. I wrote a post yesterday on measurement because the theory is that we can put a value on everything, which is, you know, that's the beauty of AI and technology, right? So that's where the quote came from. W. Edwards Deming, one of the first ever statisticians, computer scientists in the 60s. W. Edwards Deming worked for Ford. He did a lot of work in Japan around quality control. And he's the guy that coined the phrase, you can't manage what you don't measure. You've all heard that before, right? He's the guy that said it. So I did a whole post on this yesterday about there's a lot of stuff that philosophically you shouldn't measure because, you know, we're people and we need to make sense of it. So let me finish with this quote. This will wrap it up nicely. This is from the co-founder of Pixar, Ed Catmull, the guy that now heads up Walt Disney Animation Studios. You can't manage what you can't measure is a maxim that is taught and believed by many in both business and education sectors. But in fact, the phrase is ridiculous. Something said by people who are unaware of how much is hidden. Our friend realizes this. A large portion of what we manage can't be measured, and not realizing this has unintended consequences. Which is a beautiful quote, right? So I think that speaks to this man and machine piece around how do we work with technology and not against it. Good work. Good question.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for coming in. Folks, I'm going to wrap because we're about half an hour over time. But you've sat here patiently. Thank you for coming along. Hope you can come to the next one.